They said the girl was born with honey in her hands and gold in her tears. Her name was Zuri, daughter of Chief Makori, who owned lands wide enough to lose a horse and still not reach the end before sunset. She wore clothes made of silk so fine the wind hesitated to touch her, and her shoes had soles made from camel hide shipped from Morocco and sewn by old grandmothers whose eyes had seen kings fall. Zuri was not just rich, she was an ocean of wealth where crocodiles of envy swam silently. She walked through Nairobi's high places like a lioness pacing her hill, watched by all, admired by many, loved by none. And yet, for all her beauty and riches, Zuri's heart was colder than the rainy season without fire. She had no time for love. To her, men were like cheap bracelets from a street vendor, colorful, noisy, but easily broken. Her father, tired of her stubborn independence, gave her a command. Get married before the festival of harvest, or I will cut off your credit, your cars, and your guards. You will live like the rest of the world, my daughter. Zuri laughed like the hyena that finds bones in a lion's den. Fine, she said, flicking her braids over her shoulder. I will get married, but not in the way you want. She sat in her ivory tower, her eyes scanning the streets from the balcony of her apartment high above the slums. Below, the people looked like ants dragging their lives behind them. Her gaze landed on a man who sat by the same tree every day, wrapped in rags, beard like an old mat, face dark and silent like night with no moon. He never begged, only watched the cars pass. Some called him Juma. Some said he had no name. Zuri pointed her well-polished finger at him. That one. She said to her assistant, "Bring him to me. I will pay him to pretend to be my husband." They brought Juma to her doorstep, smelling of sweat and road dust, his slippers more whole than soul, eyes lowered like a goat before the butcher. Zuri wore a silk robe, her eyes sharp like the needle of a tailor cursed by a jilted lover. "I want you to be my husband," she said, "for 3 months. No questions, just smile, walk beside me, and keep quiet. I will pay you enough to feed your future children's children." Juma looked at her as if she were a joke told too many times. He nodded. "I accept," he said with a voice like cool river stones. Zuri did not know that the man before her had once walked in halls where ministers whispered and kings bowed. She did not know that Juma, born Jamal Otieno, was the hidden CEO of one of the largest tech companies in East Africa, a man who had vanished from public life after betrayal and blood took his brother and broke his soul. He had chosen the streets not because he lacked, but because the silence was cheaper than revenge. The wedding was a performance, a theater of lies with Zuri as director and Juma as the actor in borrowed robes. Cameras flashed, friends gasped, socialites whispered with mouths wide as crocodile jaws. She married a beggar, they hissed, sipping cocktails brewed from envy, but Zuri smiled like a queen who had fooled an entire kingdom. "Love is blind," she would say, her voice like mango juice, sweet and sticky. Juma moved into her penthouse, but he did not touch the wine or the women who giggled around him like mosquitoes to lantern light. He woke early, prayed facing the dawn, read books she never noticed missing from her father's shelves, and watched people with eyes too sharp for a poor man. Zuri ignored him at first, then mocked him, then grew quiet. She found herself listening when he spoke. He told her stories, not about himself, but about the world, about traders in Mombasa who sang as they sold, about girls who danced barefoot on red soil, about love that bloomed without diamonds. His words painted the walls of her heart in colors she had never known. One night, as the city slept and the stars blinked like sleepy children, Zuri found herself staring at Juma. Noticing the straightness of his back, the calm in his eyes, the storm in her own chest, she asked, "Why did you say yes to me?" He looked at her for a long time, then said, "Even a beggar knows when a queen is drowning in her own gold." She didn't know if it was insult or poem, but it shook her more than champagne ever could. Time passed like a drumbeat. 1 week, 2, then 6. Zuri changed. She wore less makeup, laughed more. She found herself making tea in the morning instead of shouting for her maid. They walked together through parks, through malls, even through the slum where Juma used to sit. People called him Bwana Zuri, and he smiled like a man who had nothing to prove. Then came the night of the Harvest Gala, a grand affair with governors and foreign investors, a place where deals were made under candlelight and secrets traded like currency. Zuri arrived with Juma beside her. People whispered again, but this time their voices were tinged with confusion. He no longer looked like a beggar. He wore a suit cut so clean it made other men look like scarecrows. His beard was trimmed, his eyes lit with quiet fire. At the gala, Zuri's father, Chief Makori, approached. "So this is your husband," he said, eyes scanning Juma like a judge watching a thief. Juma bowed his head slightly. "Sir," he said with the respect of a lion greeting an elder. "I hear you used to work in tech," Makori said, sipping his wine. "Before life crushed you," Juma smiled. "I still do in a way." Then he turned to a European investor nearby and greeted him in perfect French. The man lit up. Jamal Otieno from Achille Tech," gasps followed. Wine glasses froze midair. Zuri turned, her breath caught like a bird in a net. Her father's face shifted like a mountain hit by thunder. Juma nodded slowly. "That was my name, still is." The room buzzed like a hive on fire. Cameras turned. People whispered not in mockery, but in awe. Zuri stared at him as if seeing him for the first time, as if all the silk in the world could not dress her pride again. "You lied to me." She whispered. He looked at her gently. "You never asked who I was, only what I looked like." Outside, after the gala had shattered into whispers and news stories, Zuri followed him to the waiting car. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, voice trembling. He looked at her, not with anger, but with sadness as soft as a funeral drum. "Because I wanted to know if a woman like you could ever love a man like me without the gold." She dropped her purse. Her hands were shaking. "And what did you find?" He smiled. "You are still learning." Juma walked away that night, not with rage, but with the silence of someone who has already forgiven. The next day, newspapers exploded. Zuri marries billionaire in disguise, the beggar who was king. Memes were born, TikToks danced to wedding footage. America called it a fairy tale, Europe called it a social experiment. But in Africa, the elders nodded. "A wise man hides in plain cloth," they said. "Only fools chase shadows and ignore the moon." Zuri stayed alone for a month. She walked barefoot into markets, helped mothers carry their baskets, sat with her father and asked him about the days before gold. She did not chase Juma. She changed. And one day, when the rains returned and the earth smelled of forgiveness, she stood outside a new tech school in Kybra, funded by an anonymous donor. She walked through the gate and saw him, teaching a class of boys how to build dreams from wires. He looked up. She said nothing. He nodded. She walked in and sat beside him. The students cheered. And so the fake marriage became a real story, one that traveled across oceans and settled in hearts, not because of the wealth or the twist, but because deep down, every soul longs to be seen for who they are when no one is watching. And that is how a rich girl's lie found her truth, and a beggar's silence rewrote a love the whole world couldn't stop sharing. The sun returned to Nairobi like a long-lost child, golden and shy, spilling light on rooftops and warming hearts that had grown quiet with waiting. The air smelled of hope, fresh chapati from roadside stalls, school uniforms drying in the sun, the promise of something new. In the modest tech school built in the heart of Kybra, children buzzed like bees in a sugar field. Screens flickered, keyboards clacked, and laughter leaped from the windows like kites caught in the wind. Jamal stood among the students, his sleeves rolled, his heart calm, his soul almost healed. He had traded boardrooms for blackboards, shares for smiles. Here, he was not the billionaire CEO, not the beggar by the baobab, not even Bwana Zuri. He was just Jamal, teacher, builder, man. But even in peace, echoes of the past are never far. Zuri returned to the school every day, not in high heels but in soft sandals, not with perfume but the scent of mango soap. She wore dresses made by local women, earrings carved from wood, and a smile that no longer came from pride but presence. She never asked Jamal to forgive her, and he never asked her to explain. They simply existed beside each other like fire and wind, sometimes burning, sometimes cooling, always circling. One morning, as the school prepared for its first graduation, the students insisted Zuri join them. "You are the reason the school exists," they said. "If not for your lie, there would be no truth." She laughed, that deep laugh that once turned heads at cocktail parties, now rising pure and rich in the middle of the slum. She agreed. Jamal watched her from across the courtyard, his eyes unreadable but not cold. He had rebuilt his life from rubble, but one piece still floated outside the walls of his heart. Zuri, that night, after the celebration, Zuri found Jamal fixing a flickering light in the hallway. She stood quietly, holding 2 cups of chai. "I brought you tea," she said. He looked up, the bulb glowing above his head like a tiny moon. "Are you trying to bribe the electrician?" he asked, teasing. She smiled. "Maybe, or maybe I just missed your stories." He took the cup. They sat on a wooden bench that groaned beneath their weight but held firm like the past that refused to snap. The stars were bright, and somewhere a rooster crowed too early or too late. "You know," Zuri began softly, "when I first chose you, I thought I was saving myself. I thought I was clever. But you were the one who saw me, the real me, the scared me, and I hated you for it." Jamal sipped the tea. "We both wore masks," he said. "Mine just smelled worse," she chuckled. "I changed," she whispered. "I don't need money the way I used to. I don't need attention, but I still need you." He turned slowly, eyes searching hers. "Are you sure?" Zuri didn't flinch. "Yes, not because you're rich, not because of guilt, but because even when I was at my worst, you stood beside me with no reason, no benefit, and I never forgot." The silence after that was thick with truth. Jamal set down his cup. "Then let's stop pretending." He stood, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a tiny box made from acacia wood. Inside was not a diamond, not even gold, just a simple ring carved from sandalwood, polished by hand, warm to the touch. He had made it himself. No cameras. "No fake weddings, no contracts," he said. "Just you and me. Do you want to start again?" Zuri's eyes filled with tears. "Not the kind that ruin makeup, but the kind that cleanse a soul." She nodded. "Yes, I do, I really do." Their wedding was held on the same grounds where the school stood. There were no chandeliers, only strings of light hung between trees. No foreign chefs, only aunties with big pots and bigger laughter. Children threw petals, elders gave blessings, and a choir of orphans sang songs that carried to the clouds. The news caught wind again, of course. "Rich girl marries former beggar for real this time." But by now, the world had stopped mocking and started believing. They moved into a small home beside the school, where Jamal continued to teach and build startups run by the youth, and Zuri founded an art center for girls who had once thought money was the only thing that made them matter. She painted again, something she had not done since she was a child. Her paintings sold across Europe and America, not because of the name behind them, but because of the soul inside them. One day, years later, an American journalist visited to do a follow-up on their story. She asked them, "Was it all fate? Did you always believe this would happen?" Jamal laughed. "No," he said. "I believed it was over. Many times," Zuri nodded. "But every time we thought it was the end, something small kept us going. A cup of tea, a smile, a story. Love isn't made from grand gestures. It's made from the quiet choice to stay." The article went viral again. But by then, Jamal and Zuri didn't care. Their story had already gone viral where it mattered, in the hearts of those who thought they were too broken to be seen, too rich to be real, too poor to be wanted, or too late to be loved. And so the beggar who was a billionaire and the heiress who learned to live with nothing built a life from the middle of everything, where gold fades but love never rusts. The story ended not with a kiss or a dance, but with 2 hands held tight, walking side by side into the quiet, beautiful ordinary. And that was enough.